This wasn't supposed to happen. Max Verstappen secretly showed up at the Nurburgring, driving a Mercedes. No announcement. No cameras. No warning. And in less than 24 hours, he did something that shocked professional GT drivers. He went straight to the top. Faster than specialists. Faster than veterans with hundreds of laps on that track. And that's not even the craziest part. Because what he said after getting out of the car is now raising serious questions inside Formula One. Questions about his future. Questions about his motivation. And a possibility that nobody wanted to consider. What if the best driver in the world doesn't want to be in Formula One anymore? Stay until the end, because the final detail changes everything. Subscribe now, or you're going to miss what happens next. But here's where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Because this wasn't just a random appearance. It didn't start in 2026. It actually started months earlier, in complete silence. Back when Verstappen made a decision that most people ignored at the time. He stepped away, just for a moment, from Formula One. And went to the Nürburgring for the first time in a GT3 car. Different rules. Different physics. Different kind of pressure. And still, the result was immediate. He won. Not after a long adaptation. Not after learning the category. First attempt. First impact. And that detail is more important than it seems. Because it planted an idea. An idea that started growing quietly in the background. What if Formula One is no longer the only place where he can dominate? But this is where things get even more interesting. Because after that first experience, he didn't just walk away. He went deeper. He changed manufacturers. From Ferrari to Mercedes. And that decision raised eyebrows immediately. Not just because of performance, but because of what it represents. A Red Bull driver, choosing Mercedes machinery outside Formula One. That is not normal. That is not casual. That is strategic. And then came the Nürburgring tests. The so-called secret sessions. No media. No official coverage. But this is the green hell. Nothing stays hidden there. Within hours, footage appeared. And people noticed something subtle, but powerful. He was not testing limits. He was redefining them. Flat out through sections where most drivers lift. Aggressive on entry. Unbelievably precise on exit. And more importantly, consistent. Lap after lap. No hesitation. No adaptation phase. Just pure execution. But that's not the real story. The real story is what this car allowed him to do. No hybrid systems. No energy management. No unpredictable deployment issues. Just mechanical grip and driver input. Simple. Raw. And brutally honest. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Verstappen looked comfortable again. And here's where everything connects back to Formula One. Because while this was happening, the discussions around the 2026 regulations were getting louder. More complex systems. More dependency on energy recovery. More limitations on pure driving feel. And suddenly, the contrast became impossible to ignore. On one side, a car that demands management. On the other, a car that rewards instinct. And Verstappen experienced both, almost at the same time. That kind of comparison changes a driver. It forces a realization. And once that realization starts, it doesn't stop. Because the next thing he did after these tests is what really started to worry people inside the sport. Because what he did next made this impossible to ignore. Just days after dominating at the Nürburgring, he didn't rest. He didn't reset. He didn't even disconnect. He went straight into another car. Another category. Another completely different machine. And this is where things start to feel intentional. Not random. Not curiosity. A pattern. Because now, it wasn't just one experience outside Formula One. It was two. Back to back. Different cars. Different philosophies. Same outcome. Control. Comfort. Confidence. And most importantly, enjoyment. That word matters more than anything else in this story. Because drivers at this level don't struggle with speed. They struggle with feeling. And when that feeling disappears, everything changes. But here's where it gets even more serious. While Verstappen was exploring all these different cars, Formula One kept moving in the opposite direction. More rules. More complexity. More systems controlling performance. And less room for pure instinct. So now you have two parallel realities. One where driving feels natural. And one where it feels restricted. And Verstappen experienced both, within the same week. That kind of contrast is dangerous. Because once a driver realizes something feels better elsewhere, it creates a question that cannot be ignored. Why stay? But most people still thought this was just a phase. A temporary escape. A way to clear his mind before returning to Formula One. And that assumption is exactly what makes the next part so shocking. Because behind the scenes, something much bigger was already happening. Conversations, internal discussions, quiet doubts starting to surface. Not about performance, but about purpose. And this is the detail almost nobody saw coming. These Nurburgring tests were not just about preparing for a race. They were part of something deeper. Something that connects directly to the biggest question in Formula One right now. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because everything that happens next points in the same direction. And then, the story finally exploded. Not on track. Not during a race. But in the paddock. Because right after all of this, Nurburgring, GT cars, testing, that visible change in attitude, a report came out that shook the entire sport. Max Verstappen is seriously considering leaving Formula One. Not switching teams. Not negotiating leverage. Leaving. Completely. And suddenly, everything you've seen so far starts to make sense. The secret tests. The constant search for different cars. The way he reacted after driving the Mercedes GT3. That wasn't curiosity. That was comparison. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable for Formula One. Because this isn't coming from an average driver. This is the benchmark. The reference point. The driver everyone else is measured against. If he starts questioning the sport itself, that's not a small issue. That's structural. But here's the detail that makes this even more serious. He actually has a way out. A real one. There is a clause in his contract. An exit option after this season. Clean. Legal. Immediate. And that changes everything. Because now this is not theory. It's not speculation. It's a decision waiting to be made. And every experience he has outside Formula One adds weight to that decision. Every lap in a different car. Every moment where he feels in control again. Every time he steps out of the cockpit, smiling. It pushes the balance in one direction. But this is where the story becomes even more complex. Because inside Formula One, things are not improving. The 2026 regulations are still a major concern. Drivers are talking. Quietly. Teams are adjusting. But the core issue remains the same. Too much complexity. Too little freedom. And Verstappen has already said something that should not be ignored. That what he is doing now feels like the opposite of driving. Think about that for a second. The most naturally gifted driver of this generation, saying that Formula One no longer feels like real driving. That statement alone changes the weight of everything. Because now, the Nürburgring is not just a side story. It becomes the reference point. The place where he rediscovered something. Something simple, but powerful. Control. Connection. Enjoyment. And once a driver reconnects with that feeling, going back becomes harder than anyone expects. So now, the entire situation is balanced on one question. Not whether he can stay. Not whether he has options. But whether Formula One can give him a reason to stay. And what happens next is where everything finally comes together. And this is where everything finally connects. Because now, it's no longer about Nürburgring. It's no longer about GT cars. It's no longer even about one driver exploring different categories. This is about a breaking point. A moment where everything built up starts to demand a decision. And that decision is closer than people think. Because the calendar doesn't stop. Races continue. Results keep coming. And in Japan, the contrast became impossible to hide. While Mercedes kept dominating, while other drivers adapted, Verstappen struggled. Not dramatically. Not in a way that looks catastrophic on paper. But in a way that tells a deeper story. No control. No confidence. No connection with the car. And this is the part most people overlook. It's not about finishing position. It's about how it feels inside the cockpit. Because a driver like Verstappen doesn't measure performance only in results. He measures it in sensation. In precision. In trust. And when that disappears, the result becomes irrelevant. But here's where things reach another level. Because after Japan, there was no immediate reaction. No strong public statement. No dramatic announcement. Just silence. And in Formula One, silence is never empty. Silence means thinking, evaluating, deciding. And behind that silence, there is a timeline forming. A very clear one. The break before the next phase of the season. Weeks without racing. Weeks without pressure. Weeks where decisions are made. And during that time, there is still one event ahead. One moment that could define everything. The 24 hours of Nürburgring. The most demanding race in endurance racing. The ultimate test of focus, control, and mental strength. And he will be there. In that Mercedes GT3. No hybrid systems. No artificial limitations. Just driving. for 24 hours. And this is the final piece of the puzzle. Because that race is not just another event. It's a comparison. A final measurement. Two worlds. Two completely different experiences. And one decision waiting at the end of it. Because after that, there are no more excuses. No more experiments. No more what if. He will know exactly how he feels. Exactly what he wants. And exactly what he is willing to leave behind. So now everything leads to one unavoidable question. When the best driver in the world rediscovers what driving is supposed to feel like, what happens if Formula One can't give him that anymore? Because if the answer to that question is no, then the comeback at Nurburgring was never just a comeback. It was the beginning of an exit. And if that sounds extreme, it's because it is. Because Formula One has seen dominant drivers before. Legends. Champions who defined entire eras. But almost none of them ever reached this point. A point where leaving the sport feels more attractive than staying at the top of it. And that's what makes this moment different. Because Verstappen is not declining. He is not slowing down. He is not being replaced. He is still the reference. Still the fastest. Still the driver every team would build around instantly. And yet, he's the one questioning everything. That's the real shock. Not the Nürburgring. Not the Mercedes. Not even the performance. It's the mindset. Because when a driver at his peak starts looking elsewhere, it usually means something inside the sport is broken. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Because Formula One cannot easily fix this. The regulations are locked in. The direction is already chosen. The complexity is not going away overnight. And that means one thing. The sport might not change fast enough to keep him. And if that happens, the consequences go far beyond one driver. Because Verstappen is not just another name on the grid. He is the center of the current era. Remove him, and the entire balance of the sport shifts. Competitively, commercially, emotionally. Fans don't just follow teams. They follow stories. And right now, he is the story. But here's the final layer that most people are still missing. This is not just about frustration. It's about rediscovery. Because at the Nürburgring, he didn't just perform. He remembered something. Something simple, but essential. Why he started racing in the first place. Not for systems. Not for regulations. Not for managing energy deployment. But for that feeling. That raw, direct connection between driver and machine. And once that feeling comes back, it changes your standards. It raises the bar. It makes everything else harder to accept. So now, the situation is brutally clear. Formula One is asking him to adapt. But the Nürburgring reminded him, he doesn't have to. And that is the real turning point in this entire story. Because from here, there are only two possible outcomes. Either Formula One gives him a reason to fall in love with driving again, or he finds that feeling somewhere else. And if he chooses the second option, then what we saw at the Nürburgring was not just a moment of freedom.